Our leaders have adopted defensive strategies while dealing with the Chinese. The Chinese only recognize strength,
cooperate with the small and attack the big.
wanting to increase its capability is because China has a fear. Because on one side you have the Himalayas, and on the other side is the South China Sea.
If there is a good relationship between India and Pakistan, that will inevitably enhance China's own interest.
If you see the statements made by Xi Jinping, he also says that we want Taiwan to be unified without fighting a war.
He links the Kashmir issue with the Tibet problem, and then it's also kind of like China's sovereignty and sovereignty issue as we have they have in Tibet, so as we have in Kashmir.
Hello, patrons and followers of Diplomacy Direct. Today we are going to discuss the reality, perceptions, and all in between factors behind the Chinese attitudes towards hegemony under its sinocentrism and aspirations of molding the globe with its cultural, political, economic power play to prove that it's the chosen center of the world as professed in its ideology of Tianxia, which literally means the divine land under the heaven, which is actually absorbed in China's political culture as the ordained land for all the mortals, the ideology associated for the political sovereignty and then the subsequent governance. Hi, I'm Vipultamhane and welcome to Diplomacy Direct, yet another discussion with experts to bring to you the geopolitics, national security observers, the government or defense services aspirants, and generally all the patriots to gain the perspective on modern day events that are shaping our nation and today's world. Today, we have two authors from varied backgrounds but converge in thoughts at one topic, and that's China. So, we have General Rajan Kochhar, who is a prudent veteran commander and author of the book The Chinese Myth. And on the other hand, we have Professor Rajiv Ranjan, an astute academician and author and editor of the book China and South Asia Changing Regional Dynamics, Development, and Power Play. So I'll start with Major General Kochhar. So, General Dr. Rajan Kochhar, VSM, PhD, is an alumni of NDA and Defense Services Staff College, Wellington, with more than 3 decades of experience in Indian Army. Former MGAOC at the Central Command, presently arbitrator at the Ministry of Defense, columnist at Economic Times, member USI, CENJOWS, and IDSA, senior advisor at DRAS. He has served as aide de camp to Governor of Tamil Nadu during the IPKF operations in Sri Lanka. His recent book, Breaking the Chinese Myth, talks about how Chinese ideologies are set out to remodel the world global order. And the book talks about China's military modernization, the gradual progression and subsequent threat perceptions that calls for military reforms. In his book, he recommends different reforms and merits the attention of the appropriate forms of policy making in our government. Welcome to Diplomacy Direct, General Kochhar.
Thank you very much, Vipul. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you, sir. Next up is Professor Rajiv Ranjan. He is an executive director of Center for South Asian Studies, Institute of Global Studies, and an associate professor at College of Liberal Arts at Shanghai University, China. Previously, he was a research fellow at Indian Council of World Affairs, ICWA, at New Delhi from 2015 to 2016, and a visiting senior scholar at School of Political Science and Public Administration, Shandong University in Jinan, China, from 2013 to 2015. And Rajiv has completed his PhD in Chinese studies from JNU, and today he brings in a plethora of his Chinese culture knowledge to gel in with thoughts with General Kochhar. So, welcome, Professor Ranjan.
Thank you, Dr. Vipul. Thank you.
So, basically, his book, that is China and South Asia, the regional dynamics, development, and power play, is co-authored with Professor Guo Chang'an, who is the Fulbright Scholar and Dean of Graduate School at Shanghai University. The book brings comprehensive and expert analysis of China's engagement with South Asia by covering historical, social, political, cultural, economical, and strategic factors, while including perspectives from individual countries, right? So he writes about China's economic and security environment as impacted by globalization, regional interests, and demand of cooperation, and individual dynamics with India, Russia, and US. So said that for opening the discussion, could both you gentlemen briefly expound on your books, the content and broad ideas for our viewers, and how does it echo and connect with the other book on today's forum? So, General Kochhar sir, we'll start with you first.
Thanks a lot. It's been a extreme honor and privilege to be a part of your forum.
Thank you, sir.
Sure, the readers are going to be wise after we go through these discussions, because it's going to cover the security aspect, the defense aspect, as well as the geopolitics. Breaking the Chinese myth is my first, is primarily an honest attempt to uncover the Chinese myth and expose the invincibility of the PN. See, I will just give you an example. I was traveling in a cab, and I asked the driver कि हाँ भाई आपको कैसा लगता है, how do you feel our army is going to match to the Chinese? And he said, sir, वो तो बहुत मजबूत आर्मी, the very tough nut to crack. So you can imagine the psychological warfare has reached the common man in Delhi. So these mindsets and mental blocks need to change, I feel, because what I have tried to do is carry out an in-depth analysis of the Chinese psyche and how we can counter it. It is extremely relevant to the present times because it sent a strong message worldwide that 1962 is history. The present Indian armed forces is no pushover and cannot be cowed down by the Chinese propaganda of technology and the like. Whenever China wants to scare an adversary, it will carry out a big equipment demonstration, make videos, and the global times will give it all coverage. And so that the nations get intimidated that, oh my God, this PLA is a force to reckon with. So we have to break that myth today. The story of David and Goliath should not be forgotten. The Chinese are not 10 feet tall. I must tell you, our field commanders are capable of meeting this challenge. So now this book begins with the management of our borders. It's a hostile environment. We have, you can imagine, 15,000 kilometers of land border and 10,000 kilometers is with acrimonious neighbors. So you can imagine the vulnerability we have in our border. So I talk about in this book putting a border management under a specialized authority I have termed it as a National Border Management Authority, because what we have realized is that there are multifarious agencies, security agencies, which are there on the border, starting from Indian Army, BSF, Assam Rifles, Special Frontier Force, ITBP. You can name everything, Coast Guards. So they are all operating under different command and control organizations, so that coordinated sharing of intelligence is not there. So I have recommended that the government you have actually look at it, and also at the same time a maritime boundaries, 7,500 kilometers of maritime boundary. We share it with 6 countries. So there is a lot of smuggling, drugs, and all that taking place from the sea route today. If you see the Kutch area of Gujarat and all, you will find there is a lot of this activity going on. So I have recommended that a National Border Management Authority takes care of the sea routes as well as the land borders. The next chapter talks about the emergence of China as a global power, how it has transformed itself into an economic power of reckoning. So it's quite interesting on this Chinese three world theory, how it has gone about to counter the influence of the United States and its allies, as well as Russia. So basically, I talk about that. In the next chapter, I have made a comparative assessment of the PLA with the Indian Army, and when I make a statement that the PLA is not 10 feet tall, subsequently I will be covering this and giving you facts and figures that why it is not 10 feet. Then I have one entire chapter has been devoted to the present conflict, how we went about it, what are the shortcomings we have had, and all those things. And one chapter is devoted to the requirement of a comprehensive defense strategy. Vipul, today we do not have a national defense strategy in place. So it's required our threat perceptions, our military preparedness, everything has to be documented. And the last chapter of the book, which is most relevant to the citizens of the country, is the development of the Indian defense industry and the Make in India initiative. I have been on the logistics part of the armed forces, and I have comprehensively dealt with this subject. I have done a number of webinars on this. So I've been able to put forth some cogent recommendations which are workable and which are necessary. So, in a nutshell, this is what my book is all about.
Sure. So, sir, I understand that you have also gone through Professor Ranjan's book in brief. So, how would you be able to connect the Chinese myth with his ideologies that connects to the changing regional dynamics, development, and power play?
You see, before I say, I'll just like to comment on convergence between the two books, if it is there or not. What I could gather by what Professor Rajan has said is that basically he has captured the mindset of the Chinese scholars. The mindset of the Chinese scholars seem to be very progressive, looking for a cooperative environment, a congenial environment. But unfortunately, the mindset of the Politburo or the leadership or the Central Military Commission or CCP is not that. So, how we translate this mindset, which is these scholars are mentioning about into the mindset of the thinking of the Chinese government is the China. So uh, I have concentrated on the mindset of the Chinese military and the political leadership. So we could have these two models in front of us, and we can look to where we can come to a point of convergence. So this would be my comment as of now.
So, Professor Ranjan, so could you elaborate on your book and again your ideas with the changing regional dynamics, development, and power play?
Thank you, Vipulji, for having me here. Uh, as Major General Kochhar has already stipulated the idea of his book, and it seems that this is a very interesting book. And I have gone through some of the parts, but not read, so I will be ordering on Amazon soon. But
Thank you.
thank you, sir. Let me come to the my book. The idea was to kind of like to discuss and get the idea from the scholar and the academician from the region,
Mhm.
get like what China South Asia engagements are all about. And it was also an attempt to understand what is China's South Asia policy. And because, and then I have gone through the Chinese sources, and as we know that the China doesn't have any South Asia policy per se. Like we don't have any, the India doesn't have any China policy per se. Unlike that US, every under the every administration they release their strategic paper. Now, so how the Chinese pursue this policy about the South Asia policy? Then, uh, largely they have this neighborhood policy, and that started with the Deng Xiaoping 1978 visit to Japan in October 1978, and then there he kind of like visualized, or you can say that the dictum he provided for the future engagement with Japan, and we all know that how China-Japan relationship are, right? It's a kind of like a complicated relationship. Now there he visualized that we now say that there is a kind of like hiding the like kind of China is hiding, biding the time. So there also he kind of released that let's forget the dispute and develop together. And thereby, that in Chinese, you call it like "Ge Chengyi, Chongfeng, Kaifafeng," right? That means let's forget. And I think this is one of the motto that is came to play in India-China relationship also. When the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited in 1988, and Deng Xiaoping, he had this 1.5 hour meeting one-to-one with Deng Xiaoping, and there Deng Xiaoping also discussed about creating or building an Asian century. And there, I think he again continued that let's, for some time being, forget the dispute and then we can develop together. And I think this is the kind of guiding post for Chinese neighborhood policy, and that has continued. And from there, we try to also discuss like what are the debate that is happening in China with regard to in academia and with regard to the policymakers in China. And then there you see a kind of like two contradictory picture, that what the policymakers are saying, what the academicians are saying. So this book is a kind of like detailed account of how the Chinese policymaker tries to portray its South Asia policy, although it's not in a kind of like uh, a format, but they try to like say that it becomes like they try to present as a benign force.
Mhm.
If you see the Chinese policymaker, if you analyze the government report in China, like how the Chinese leader, if you take the Xi Jinping visiting India or Pakistan or Nepal, then you see how they try to portray how the India or China relationship, China and Pakistan relationship, and then if you contrast with this all to the scholarly debate, then you will find that there is some kind of no rigorous or kind of intensive debate within China that how China can pursue its policy with regard to South Asia. Now, we have seen in this book, we try to also decipher what the international scholars try to talks about, like John Garver, Mully, and other scholar. We try to see that what their views on the China South Asia, and then the book also tries to go into detail about the what the Chinese scholars talks about. And then, as we have seen, that Tang says that let's forget the dispute, develop together. And then you have here in China that there are scholars who say, like, for example, there is a Chang who says that now he proposes to cooperate with the small and attack the big. That is, cooperate with the smaller nation in the South Asia, and then that with the like the India, right? So Xiao, Ipo. Now this was the kind of like mantra for them. But I think there is also some kind of change in narrative, change in policy, in academic debate. Now they are trying to say that not to attack the big, but also cooperate with the small, and at the same time maintain a stable relationship with the big. That is Xiao Wanta. So you have moved from cooperate with the small, attack the bigs, to cooperate with the small, but also maintain a healthy relationship with the uh, with the big. So this whole book is also try to like brings out the Chinese flavor, that what they thinks about China and the Southeast. And then you have scholars like Chang Li. He talks about where he sees that there is a good food for thought for China to develop a healthy India-Pakistan relationship that we don't see in a mainstream, that any Chinese scholar propagating or kind of like proposing that India and Pakistan should have a good relationship, because he believed that if there is a good relationship between India and Pakistan, that will inevitably enhance China's own interest. So you see that, so there is a kind of, and he links the Kashmir issue with the Tibet problem, and then that's also kind of like China's sovereignty and security issue, as we have they have in Tibet, so as we have in Kashmir. So that's, it's like kind of whole debate, whole plethora of debate happening in Chinese academia. There is a scholar like Sui who suggests that China should still adopt a proactive South Asian policy by taking geopolitical advantage and expanding population with all South Asian countries. So this whole book is all about trying to see that what Chinese scholar talks about, and then we have this the gambit of scholars that we have from South Asia and beyond, that they talks about a different topic. For example, we have Saeed Shafakat, who is a founder director of Pakistan Studies at Qadianam University. He's one of the leading academician in Pakistan. And then he writes in the chapter CPAC and changing dynamics of in China-India relationship. And he strongly refutes that CPAC is China device to encircle India, and Pakistan only is a collaborator in this scheme. He tried to downplay the CPAC is a game changer and solidifying the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But at the same time, he also believed that the CPAC could ignite the regional rivalry, and asked the very pertinent question to China, that the biggest challenge that China faces in South Asia is to manage the India-Pakistan.
So basically, what you want to bring out is, a very contradictory scenario where we are looking at a smokescreen politics also for the foreign policy. So basically, looking at the visit of in the current context of President Putin's visit to India, and thinking of the communism of USSR and the collapse of USSR, which appeared to validate that the belief that given that the China communism and Russian communism have a different flavor of communism altogether, and the so Russians eventual integration into the global economy, that is their perestroika, the chairman Deng Xiaoping, like you said, so brought to China and then got accelerated by Mikhail Gorbachev's political reforms of glasnost, right? So, but the opposite flavor of communism that Chairman Mao had for China by purging remnants of capitalist and traditional elements, and now we can see that extrapolating into the foreign policy again with the smokescreen politics, and we'll actually for the ideology and everything will come to that. So my next question is towards General Kochhar. So in specific, now that we are talking about smokescreen, in specific, could you tell us about the Chinese myth part of your book and the global smokescreen that they have created for their interests?
Coming to this question of the myth of the Chinese myth,
Mm-hmm.
see, it is what has happened over the years is that our leaders have adopted defensive strategies while dealing with the Chinese. Chinese only recognize strength. You can you can see the way Chinese react to Russians or to the United States. It's different than they react to India.
Mm-hmm.
So they always recognize strength, and they have taken advantage of our defensive approach. So over the years, with impunity, they have continued to develop the border areas. All infrastructure has come up. If you compare the infrastructure on our side and on the Chinese side, there is a vast difference.
Mm-hmm.
Huge roads have come up, dams have come up in areas, and habitat has come up. We don't have that kind of a thing. And therefore, it is important that today we are confronting them in the mountains. So we have to realize that, okay, the Chinese may be technologically stronger than us, but they lack combat experience. They lack that human element, the soldier on the ground. How well you train, how well you acclimatize, what is your mental strength, what is your physical condition, and what is your resilience will win the day for you in the war. Galwan is an example by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you compare soldier to soldier, you will break this myth, because in the mountains it is the army which occupies a dominating height can dictate the terms. Unless you have good troops, you cannot win. Second aspect is there is a myth of this leadership. Chinese leadership is quite weak-kneed. These people are sitting very much in depth, and from there they are running their armies. So this has been an observation of a lot of our army commanders and the corps commanders who have been in this area and who have been constantly interacting with these senior leadership of the Chinese. So there is a gap there.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of any conflict is to control your opponent and overcome him. You have to know their strengths and weaknesses and not what they want to project. Because when you are in the physical contact with the enemy on an eyeball to eyeball situation, you will come to know. And my parting line is to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. So it's important. So if we know our weaknesses, and if we start actually working on that, we'll be able to overcome the adversity.
Professor Ranjan, can you connect all these dots to the CCP's grand agenda and connect back to its ideologies?
Thank you. as General Saab has already connected some part, and he has already emphasized that he looks at the practical part, that is a military part, and I have looked at the policy leaders, like the leaders and the academia, how they look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you have mentioned that in opening remarks, that the Tianxia system, the all under heaven. Now, again, this is not a kind of like, in China, again, it's not that there is not another school of thought that they try to discuss and debate this whole Tianxia system. And how many takers are there? And so if you see that, and then there you have another school of thought led by Yen Xuetong, who talks about the moral realism, that is talking about moral kings, that China should be a more responsible power. And if you look at the link, the whole thing, that how the academia is advocating, writing, and then you see the behavior of the Chinese policy maker, that they go on tour and then they how portray, kind of create the Chinese image. It's all about like creating a benign image of China. And that is precisely what the Yen Tong is talking about. But he also talks about that China should be kind of like attracting the country by oh, bringing a reform in certain part of the Chinese system. Now, when it talks about the Chinese grand agenda, what is their Chinese grand agenda? And we have seen from during the Mao's days that it was a kind of like dream for establishing China, or kind of regaining their lost glory, that they try they believe in that China was a great country, and then they're trying to regain. And we have seen that Xi Jinping has, when he became the general secretary in 2012 and then became subsequently the president of China, he has coined a new concept and terms, like you have a Chinese dream, and then you add, if you link up with the Communist Party dream that you have, that is two centenary goals. And you have the two centenary goals. One goal that is now they claim that has been achieved, that is they have created a kind of like moderately prosperous society, so there is no poor people now. And then they move kind of like you can see that there is a continuous move from one concept to another concept. Now we in China now see that the concept of common prosperity. It's all about a kind of like mass mobilization, that a kind of like whole nation behind you to kind of to bring something to support. And that's also this ideology works as a to legitimize the government. Now, unlike the democracy, where you have the voting, that every 5 years we legitimize the government by the voting. China doesn't have this system, right? So how they legitimize? So the legitimacy is like, one thing is that work, that is the economic work they are doing, how they are delivering on some front, and also to mobilize this whole nation. Now there is a huge debate within academia that since like after the Mao, there is a kind of like a rupture, a kind of like deviated from the original Marxist idea. But even the Mao has not kind of brought the whole intact Marxist idea. He has his own set of changes, because Chinese system was different. Now, if you see that, so you have the from Mao Zedong thought to now you have Xi Jinping thought with Chinese characteristics for the new era. And what are those? Like if you see that now they're again trying to kind of like, if I may add, you can repackaging the whole Marxist idea into the change environment. And what are the change environment that we have seen? That now China had moved from a kind of like a developing country or poor country, a malnourished country, to a developed country. Of course, they deny that they are a developed country, because that will be a kind of they don't have then they will have to kind of know a kind of like loans and all these things, that they will lose that advantage. Now the point here is that what is those grand idea, and then to bring now that changes according to the leaders. Now we see that we have this Xi Jinping creating a common destiny for shared humankind. Now again, for Chinese perspective, they want to share their whatever they have no achieved. They want to share with their counterpart, the human, because they believe in tianxia, right? So everything is like everything under the heaven is kind of like they can connect. The point here is it's also about making allies, making friends. If you see the strategic posture of that ideology, then you have to how to win the friends. And particularly, I will come to latter part of how they are winning the friends.
Mhm.
And at the same time, they are also alienating some of the earlier friends, right? But in a process, if you see that how they are consolidating their image, the Chinese image outside China,
So,
like
Professor Ranjan, so you touched a very, a very effective point there, and if I may, you said that the government would want the common man's support again for releasing their or realizing their full potential again. So, looking from a common man's perspective, is there a better way for a common man to understand China and the domestic common man and the international common man and appreciate what they are doing globally and why they are doing it?
uh, okay, so if you and as I said, there are like two images of China. Like if you ask any common Indian about the China, they have a kind of like no radically different idea than what the Pakistani or the Sri Lanka or the Bangladeshi have, or even the African have. So the image has a different reality. That's a kind of relative.
Mhm.
Now, to understand, if you see that from a African perspective, that what China is doing, but of course they have their a negative side also. But if you look at the no, the brighter side of the Chinese, they are saying that China is helping us to develop the infrastructure. China is helping us to build roads, schools, buildings, right? The infrastructure that is essential for the development. They believe that the US has not done for last 50 years or 60 years. So they have a kind of softer image of the China, that China is fulfilling some of the goals that they are trying to convey. But there is a negative image. If you see that when China goes to any country, they bring their own continent, their own people, and then you have a class that you see some of the in country like in Cambodia, in African countries, Mongolia, where we have seen local protesting against some of the Chinese settlers who had gone to work there, because there is a kind of like sometimes cultural clash or sometimes there is a superiority. So we have seen both, that there is a positive image. Now, how? So there is a appreciation by these countries. Like if you look around in South Asia also, if you for a moment we don't talk about India, then you see that Nepali, how the Nepali are appreciated, how the Sri Lankans are doing, how the Bangladeshi are doing. So they have a kind of like good feeling that, and they have also one feeling that this is a kind of like balancing India also, because they believe that India has behaved in a kind of a big brotherly way for some time, right? So China will act as a counter, and we have seen now that how Indian approaches is changing in this neighborhood. So in a sense, what the scholars in our books is also talking about, like from the chairman of Dhaka University, Rasidul Zamma, he has written a good article in that in this edited volume that says that coping with China, that how the small nation of the Asia, South Asia is coping, and he believed that that's a hedging. It's not balancing, but it's hedging because no, if you see the uh, geostatic location of Sri Lanka, it's very hard to uh, uh, Sri Lanka or Bangladesh to do anything without have any agreement from the India. So they have to walk a very tight rope, and they how and now their policy,
And on one end of the rope there is China, the
right,
other end of the rope there is India,
India,
and it's that. So it's a tightrope walk, and ironically, as you said, it's like you know benign aggression that everybody is trying to cope up with. So, with that thought, General Kochhar sir, Chinese have a saying: "Fight 100 wars to win 100 wars, or not to engage in war but win." Considering these philosophies of Chinese scholars, what is India's strategy to win over China without engaging in a war? Again, on an ideological and a political sense of it, and considering that uh, we are yet to fully negotiate the border issue and return to the status quo. So, what do you want to say about that?
See, it's a very pertinent question which you have actually brought out. Uh, why China? There is a white paper 2011, and when Xi Jinping came into power, so he had a vision of China 2035, and that focused on making a world-class military and a strong navy. So why China is wanting to increase its capability is because China has a fear, because on one side you have the Himalayas, and on the other side is the South China Sea. So if the South China Sea gets out of control of China, China will get uh, jammed, locked, and choked. So China is interested that it must have a strong navy. It is enhancing its nuclear capability in the form of a deterrence. And the latest is that it is going in for hypersonic missiles. Because China understands, because its the air force is weak. So it's building up the capability of its rocket and missile technology to ward off. See, China's missiles are
For
so.
example, them having the S force from Russians, right? The
Yes,
way we
yes,
did.
yes, yes. I was coming to that aspect also. China is indulging a lot of its resources into artificial intelligence. It has gone into cyber, it has gone into space, and all disruptive technologies. And it is preparing itself to fight a two front war. One is with Taiwan, and the other is with India. And every day you are hearing that some new capability has come up in Tibet. So, and you would have also heard that new border laws have actually come about last month to legitimize their claims on the line of action.
Mhm.
So, their fighting without fighting, winning a war is their actually concept. Uh, if you see the statements made by Xi Jinping, he also says that we want Taiwan to be unified without fighting a war. We want them, and he's trying to intimidate these nations. Like India is also being intimidated, and Taiwan is also being intimidated. So, what should be our strategy? It's also very important. If you compare the military to military comparison, you will find that the Indian army can stand on its own with the Chinese army, because our air force is stronger.
Mhm.
The number of aircrafts are also comparable to each other. We have 13 lakh army. China has a 21 lakh army, but then most of the Chinese armies on the Taiwan side. They have a border with Vietnam also. So deployments are that side also. They have a border with Russia also. So the deployment is that side also. So China has 13 group armies. It is like our corps we have. And only two of these are against India. So you can imagine that how distribution of the Chinese PLA is taking place. So you can straight away make out that he is not interested to fight a war with India. He has got only two cores there. He is only interested in land grabs. He will fight localized battles
Sir,
in
what do you think?
specific
What is the
areas.
ideology behind it? Can you quickly tell me what is the ideology behind it?
Ideology behind it is that China fears that in case it is a war, it does not want to be on the losing side. You only fight a war when you are totally convinced that you can vanquish your adversary.
Mhm.
What happened in Vietnam? China went into Vietnam and got a bloody nose. What happened in Nathula in 1969? Again, it had to face heavy casualties. So the thought process is because China values its image a lot. It actually shows a superiority over others. If it, I think the professor can you vouch it that a Chinese citizen considers himself superior to any citizen of the world. He thinks that they are more superior in intelligence, technology, etc., everything. So if you see this ideology, what should be our approach now? Our first approach is that we have to increase our own border infrastructure. We have to match them at all costs because they only recognize strength. Second aspect is very important is that we must uh, do something which will uh, cause discomfort to them. And the first is our trade imbalance. We have to stop that thing. All this 5G was also coming to India. All those contracts have been cancelled. We banned their more than 100 apps, and all those things are there. So this is part of one strategy to actually make them hurt. The second aspect is that we have already got into alliances. Why have we got into alliances? It is again to project ourselves that we have the support of the United States, we have the support of Australia, we have the support of Japan. Recently, you would have also heard the Winter Olympics in China. The USA has announced that okay, our diplomatic ban is there, and Australia also follow. Japan will also follow. India will also follow suit. So basically, this is the strategy to actually contain them, to make them understand that in case you get into us, what you can expect. So it will more or less it will remain like this.
So talking about the adversarial strength, and then China giving China not wanting to have a bloody nose from Vietnam, and then when it comes to Vietnam, we always everybody wants to think about the US, also the from the
Yes.
trade front. So I'm reminded that former US President Bill Clinton declared that by joining the WTO, China is not simply agreeing to import more of our product, it is agreeing to import one of the democracy's most cherished values, that is economic freedom, right? And when individuals have the power to realize their dreams, they will demand a greater say. And then I connect this with the previous narration that professor gave. So again, coming to Professor Ranjan sir, if the world has to come to terms with China and her socialistic communism or communistic socialism, what is that one fundamental thing that we all got to understand to deal with them and their ideologies, their foreign policies, and basically the overall governance?
Thank you. It's a very a wonderful question, and I would like to connect with what Major General Kochhar had just ended, that is image that he was pointing out. And I think this China has this, they had this, the Western, what they call it, that 100 years of humiliation, right? Now, there is all sort of, and then there is a kind of like, no, it's a self-respect that they want. If you have asked me that what we need to understand and what the normal Chinese or Chinese leaders want. So they want a kind of equity at par with the great powers, so that they are respected, right? So all this ideology and all this foreign policies all boils down to the one effect that China is a great power and Chinese people should be respected. And we have seen in around the world that if there is a kind of mistreatment with the Chinese citizen, and then you see how the Chinese government, criticize and then engage in a kind of diplomatic tussle. Now, the point is, as you have also mentioned, that ideology. What is the Chinese ideology? And all say. Uh, what my understanding is like, if you see that the practical, I think Chinese are more practical. So the ideology has not been in a straitjacket fashion. So they keeps evolving. So you have Mao Zedong third, Deng Xiaoping, then you have Jiang Zemin 3D Percent, then you have Hu Jintao, then you have Xi Jinping. Now that means there is a certain amount of changes they bring with the leadership, and that keeps evolving. But of course, the background remains, that is the Marxist, right? So you have this Marxist sociologist, socialism. But at the same time, if you see the whole pattern, whole structure within the China, and then it's very hard to differentiate between what is the difference between the Chinese society and the US society if you look from the outside on the surface, until and unless you see the political party in the both country. Now the whole point here is, will the ideology like is like they want, like there is again debate within the left scholar in and around China, and they say that after the Mao, the Marxism and the left has kind of like altered with. Now the whole point that Chinese say that no, you don't have to be in a fix, and I think there is also some sort of realization that what went wrong with Soviet Union, right? So if you are not flexible, then there are chances that you break away. So they keep changing the ideology to suit the time, the place, and also the environment. And so now we have, what is that Xi Jinping taught for new era? What is new era, right? So now that means you don't have, you have to change. So that Marxism is not static. Now come to the foreign policy. I think the whole foreign policy again is about that they want to restore the lost glory of China. And then we have seen when she became the general secretary and president, he visited the museum, see the Chinese ancient kind of like their own glory. Governance, I think they will in the global governance. I would say that they will not tolerate, and we have seen in the kind of like emerging aggressive diplomacy that they are not going to kind of like no, it's a bullying by even by United States. And we have seen last year when the National Security Advisor of United States and Chinese they met, how they have like aggressively fought over the argument that US doesn't have any right to lecture on anything on to China. So I think they are not going to listen. I think this is going to be a kind of like new norms for China and any other country. They are not going to bully them. I think
So,
this is
Professor Ranjan, talking about the Xi Jinping era. So many Chinese believe that the country's recent economic achievements, large-scale poverty reduction, huge infrastructure investments, and development, as well as the world-class tech innovators, have come because of and not despite China's authoritarian form of government. And this baffles the entire Western world and the academicians with the features of Dengism and Maoism structured together and then woven in a way that it's working in favor of the Chinese growth, albeit it's creating nuisance for the rest of the world. And this is what we are going to revolve uh, around for quite some time now. So, for the summation, both you gentlemen, could you give your views on this? First, I would like General Kochhar to go.
It's very important. You see, the first of all, that building of trust is very important, and people to people contact. What Professor Ranjan has brought out, scholars, the academia, the professionals, uh, they are not hardliners in China. And it is important for us to create conducive environment where a people to people contact actually takes place and builds up that trust. Because today a situation is there in India and China that there is a trust deficit because of our past experience and all. So that should be the starting point, I feel. And then we can build up on the other issue.
Very well said, sir. Professor Ranjan.
Again, I will take it from where our Major General has left, that the trust, and he's absolutely right that there is a kind of like a huge trust deficit. And I think the central pillar of that, if there is a trust deficit, that is the border dispute. So I think again, India, coming back to India, China, I think India and China has to sit together to resolve this border dispute without, and what I call it as a three-body problem. That there is a very famous Nobel by the Chinese sci-fi scholar, that is three-body problem. So we have this three-body problem in China-India relationship. Now we have to kind of resolve this crisis. We have Pakistan and we have the boundary dispute, and then we have a Tibet. And sometimes this revolves. Now, to enhance this trust, I think the first thing is we have to kind of like resolve this crisis. And I don't think it's going away in near future, this boundary dispute, since we both countries are rising. So without giving and take, and I don't know who is going to become chicken in this chicken and king game, right? That's again becomes problematic. So, and once India is also developing there, the border infrastructure is also expanding. The Chinese side is also. So I think we will see a kind of like more, a kind of like frequent clashes along the border. If we don't kind of like establish a feasible mechanism to have this border talk more kind of like practical, more feasible to have this high level talk, and at the same time to kind of like vigorous attempt to resolve the crisis. If it lingers, then there is no, I don't think, because we have lost this trust since Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visit to 1988, since till 2020. Now again, we are in an era of kind of like trust deficit. And what I call it in Chinese, we lost a Chinese generation. If you see from 1962 to 1988, we have a lost generation in China from our sake, because they don't have any feelings, any empathy towards India. The generation that those were born in 1962 to 1988. Apart after 1988, we see how the Bollywood has become successful in China, because these are the post-90s generation. So they have this warmth in relationship, yoga, Bollywood, and I think now we are going again in this kind of lost generations. I think the post-20 generation in China again will have to calculate, incalculate, enhance this mutual trust, and I don't think it's going away very easily until and unless we have a leadership that meets suddenly, and then you have C and Modi meeting at third place or in India, and then we see a kind of like new euphoria in India-China relations.
Thank you very much. So basically, as a summation, I would like to say that where we arrive at is that trust built by Chairman Deng Xiaoping is very much sublimed and back to nothing in the Xi Jinping area, and where Xi Jinping is performing a balancing act between CCP and PLA going hand in hand. And there is a juggling of a lot of ideologies. Therefore, so gentlemen, thank you so much for being on Diplomacy Direct. Really valuable inputs, and thank you for your time. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Bipulji.
Thanks a lot,
sir.
Professor Ranjan also. It was a
Jai
pleasure.
Hind. Jai Hind.
It was a pleasure to interact.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.